Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest CTO Craft Bytes. Today, I'm talking about exploring the future of platform development, a glimpse into 2030 with GenAI. Hopefully, you can all see my screen. If not, please shout in the chat. And if this is your first time at CTO Craft Bytes, let me tell you a little bit more about this group. CTO Craft is a mentoring and coaching community for technology leaders around the world, focusing on supporting technologists in their leadership growth. Community members are over 5,000, and CTO Craft provides them with one-on-one coaching, mentoring groups, a curated Slack community, and events like this one. Also, a huge thanks to our partner Vention for helping making these Bytes events possible. So go for the presentation today. You can add your questions at any time from the Ask a Question link on the right of the video. So let's talk about exploring the future of platform development. Right then, so who am I? I'm Glyn Roberts. You've probably seen me at the conferences, the mixers, and some previous Bytes events. I'm currently the CTO of Digital Solutions at Vention, which is a leading global development agency. Vention has around 3,000 engineers based around globally. We've got Europe, Eastern Europe, over to a bit of Asia with Uzbekistan, and even a Mexico office as well. I started originally as a developer in an agency, working up to multiple different CTO roles over the last 20 years across both the UK and Europe. And I've worked most of my time inside agency, so I've experienced like deep platform development, which is why this topic I find so very interesting at this point, especially with generative AI. Are developers going to keep on coding? All the questions around this. So I think it's worth to try and go through this topic and understand where the industry is going over the next 5 to 6 years. So let's say I've been to the future. It's 2030. Elon Musk has colonized Mars with Shiba Inus. Sam Altman is running for supreme overlord of the world. Even his board can't stop him. And Jeff Bezos is still in great shape. So looking forward, how do people interact with technology in the future? The way people work and play is going to be around even the metaverse. I know it's going to take a while to catch on, but it's a very immersive experience, and that's going to encompass more people to actually utilize this technology more as it becomes cheaper, more available, and not making you feel unwell when you actually use it. AR, VR, I believe is actually going to be more heavily used as we get into the further field. The Apple Vision Pro may have been forgotten about very quickly this year. There was all the news when they're releasing it, but there's no more talk about it, surprisingly. But I believe future iterations are going to make this a very powerful tool. The chat and voice capabilities. With the advancements of things like AI, this format becomes really useful for both good and bad reasons, I think. So I know we've had a chat and voice spike about 5-6 years ago. I think we've got another one coming up soon with AI being able to improve and do a lot of things without a user interface. But still, mobile and desktop are still going to exist. Because of the mobile user interface piece, you still need to be able to do this. So, and as you would expect, AI is going to become part of everyday life. So every industry you can think of: farming, teaching, science, roads, drugs, policing, recycling, everything you can possibly think of. Recycling obviously is going to be a great benefit to literally, if you throw all your rubbish away normally, instead of having separate bins, and it will actually separate it for you. I can't see a reason why that's not a realistic future. In all these cases, large amounts of data is going to be collected, analyzed, and providing obviously regular feedback for further improvements for the ways these companies operate. And by now, development has also changed. If we are looking 5-6 years ahead, I do believe that code is now a commodity. From the NVIDIA CEO, Jason Huang, if I'm saying that correctly, noted during his 2023 earnings call, we've democratized computer programming for everybody who could explain in his human language a particular task to be performed. I think that's very optimistic from that point, but I think we're definitely on that path. So the way I try to think about this is, what does development look like in the future? And this is like the rough flow that I'd see that development would actually get done. So let's consider a brand new platform to start with. Firstly, you've got discovery or requirements gathering to understand what to build. You then got a platform selection of which UI experiences to be producing. You then got the design stages to obviously customize that for your company and brand. Technology selection to be able to select which technologies, how it's going to be built. and everything else is managed by, some form of AI or automation. And, I'll quickly walk through the steps to try and explain what this encompasses and what we can actually do today already. So let's start off with the discovery piece, identifying what to build. Identifying what to build is actually difficult even for humans right now. People like us, CTOs, where we're in the product space, we do struggle, especially in agency, talking to lots of customers where they are not entirely sure how they want to build their product, exactly what they want to build. So how is an AI supposed to know what to build when the client doesn't even know themselves? So firstly, I think there's a disconnect. People are thinking that they are going to interact with models directly rather than agents that understand the context. So right now, you can utilize a model or even ChatGPT to say, okay, I want to build a product that sells shoes. And yeah, it'll give you like a rough structure, but that doesn't really give you much to work with. I think that it's going to be a much more iterative approach. So we're going to be iterating over the discussions, just like you would do when you are questioning a new product owner or a new business, exactly what they want, and then you dig into that. So as a simple example, I want to sell shoes. So what are the options for each shoe size? Can you choose different sizes per foot? Examples like that. These are all questions that AI should be able to identify variations of what's being requested. And they should even be able to give other variations that you wouldn't even think of, or recommendations about what's actually going on with industry trends or other businesses that work out there publicly. And then there's the validate the requirements piece. So, covering edge cases that maybe you didn't anticipate. Things like, can you buy mismatched shoes? Like with brands, can I buy a left shoe for Nike and a right shoe for Adidas or something like that? This type of piece already exists in the market. The LLMs that exist right now are, I think, really good. So I think this is already technically possible, but it hasn't been well implemented yet. Especially dealing with direct the model side, you need some more middle layer or agents in the middle to actually question and refine the requirements further of what's actually being asked for, to really pull out the information of what the vision is of the product owner to be able to do this. Then we're going into platform selection. So determining what you actually want to build for. So right now we've got the issue where if you've got a limited budget and you want to build a new platform, you'd start off normally with just web, because the development costs are too high to build the mobile app version, to build an AI chatbot version, and then don't even think about trying to do gaming or metaverse side of things as well. So these limited budgets is what hold a lot of people back. So, but if the costs to actually build these products are very small, then why would you only select one option? You'd want to be available wherever you can be. So yes, right now there's a high token cost. When we're running these models, it is expensive, but these costs are going to come down. So to validate the product market fit, I don't feel that we're going to just be stating just a web version only in future. I think we're going to be building out for all these different types of UX experiences that can exist. So as we do move forward, AR, VR, metaverse, the meta glasses that you could have, I feel that there's going to be an ecosystem inside all of these. And therefore, you need to be able to select which products you'd want, which environments you want these products to be available in. Then we go into design. So brand and design is always a unique identifier for businesses. So some companies still want to pay for custom design as we move forward. And converting those custom designs to code has actually become very easy. Figma, for example, already has a convert to code option, which is very useful. But I think that, admin panels, for example, don't need custom design. These can just be predefined templates built against. And most early stage startups, I think no code solutions with templates and drag and drop functionality is actually going to become much more of a default than it is now. There's already a few providers out in the market that do such things. So right now you've got a Teleporth queue, like one example I've done here, where you can drag and drop off an existing template or build from scratch, and you can export it straight out into things like React and Angular with like code examples. I mean, I've definitely seen some feedback of some people saying that the code isn't that clean, but it's a fantastic starting point to be able to build an entire front-end experience straight off the bat. So this is more automation rather than an AI piece. But I think this is an important thing to note, that this is going to become more easily usable and more easily integrated into a back-end system which is where, a generative AI for code can really kick in. But the key thing missing in current times is a solution to understand the requirements and highlight or build the designs missing from the functionality required. So you can't just allow an AI to build the front end design for you. You still need a human involved to tie in the requirements for the front end to what the design actually needs to be consisting of. Then we get into the technology selection. Now, this I've been thinking quite a lot about, and I think it's a really interesting concept. As LLMs become better at code generation, obviously they're going to support the most popular languages. Same with, how to actually build the application and host it, like which cloud providers, with monoliths versus microservices or serverless, and then also integrating in with things like third parties. So building third parties into AI, code generating tools to hook into Stripe or hook into Mailgun or SendGrid is going to be expected, because that should be a very common use case for most sites that get built today. But most interestingly, if code is not created or managed by humans, why should we be expecting that the languages that we build with today are still going to be used in the future? Of course, initially they have to be. So anything that we generate with AI code right now, you need to be able to read it from a developer standpoint, be able to understand what you're building, is it going to execute, and then fix it if there's anything wrong with it. But actually, there's already cases of university students this year that have already built examples of AI code frameworks which are not human readable. I expect that to become a much more default as we go into the future. So if there is no need for engineers to actually look at the code that's getting generated, there's no need to keep it in the same format and use the same languages that we use today. But we'd only ever trust that if all the other problems that I'm going to cover here today are actually solved. So AI will replace developers requires AI to be competent in all the other tasks, not just writing code. There's so much more aspects to be considering as part of a development process than just code generation. So building tests. So I'd say once we've actually identified the requirements, the technologies, the UX, and the design that we want to implement, the first stage is, before you can do code generation, I believe, is actually building a testing framework for what the code needs to be assessing itself against. And building tests with AI is actually already pretty good, as long as you've got a strong requirements list, of course. You can create large numbers of variations very quickly to be looping through the behavior that's expected. So this is what I would expect from the process to actually building code, is to build the tests first. So with like a BDD approach. Now the big one, AI writing code. Let me get a quick sip before I get into this. So the biggest thing to highlight is humans almost never write working code on the first try. I know I don't. I've been a bit out of practice because I spend much more time dealing with people now. But, essentially, even when I was a much more heavier developer, the first code that you write, you're always editing it, changing it to make it work for what you've been expected to do. So I would expect AI code to be written as a rough version to pass the first chunk of tests, then the next functionality to be written, and the old code rewritten to account for that. And this is an iterative loop that gets done again and again. So the AI will be an intelligent decision maker in the loop as it works through these iterations, and doing even more at the end to optimize the code further. So the examples that we see people talk about at the moment of, oh, the code it generates is poor, it's like, well, that was a first iterative attempt of the requirements that you've been given. You haven't given much more context outside or anything to base it against. So I don't feel it's like a fair assessment yet. I also think that what we've got right now isn't actually the end game that we're going to be. It's likely going to need different agents at multiple levels. You'll need one to review at a high level to make sure the behavior matches, and then another one at a lower level to ensure that the changes they're implementing are correct. And then you may even need even more levels in between as well to ensure that the code is actually producing the output that you fully require. So if this becomes more affordable, I can expect automated tools to be utilizing generative AI to generate code in this way. I mean, there's even the possibility that you're going to have like a focused LLM that's just built purely for language and frameworks. I have been asking AWS if they're going to open up their like Code Whisperer of an API level, so therefore you can try and do the same thing there. They say they get a lot of requests like that, but they haven't announced anything that they're going to actually release yet. Next, the coding process, let's be clear, is not a straight line. So let's not expect AI to get things right in the first try either. So during the coding process, even if you are producing a working result, the likelihood is there going to be more edge cases that will be identified and decisions are going to need to be made and confirmed by a human. So, we're going to expect a multiple iterative loop of saying, well, since we built the code, we've also identified this use case and this use case. So therefore, you're adding more tests, you're validating with the supervisor that this is actually a suitable test and a suitable outcome expected. And then near the end, accessibility should be tested, automated security testing on the code, things like SonarQube or whatever third-party tool out there to be able to harden up the code that you're generating. And as generative AI becomes better and cheaper, these costs will be tiny in comparison to an expert developer actually building this code. So right now, there are multiple different code development tools out there. Not just things like Copilot that exist and Code Whisperer, which are supporting tools. There are tools out there trying to actually be this, trying to produce code from a requirements list and provide it back. So you've got Devin, you've got GPT Pilot. So Devin calls itself the very first, AI developer. Technically, GPT Pilot was out before them, quite a few months before them. But still, a human is still needed to supervise the AI and look at the code. And that's the biggest block that they have right now. So obviously, this isn't a solution that exists at this stage, but we're still in the very early days of AI. And I can expect this to keep on progressing and getting much better as we go forward. Then we reach the release stage. So with automation tools like Terraform that already exist, it's not hard to imagine AI being able to orchestrate and release code very easily on any architecture setup, monolith, microservices, serverless. I don't imagine an issue there. And then what happens when the product is live? You'd expect some form of AI tooling that would be able to provide recommendations on changes based on user behavior. So this would be a bit more like a concierge service to the owners. It'll say, oh, we're noticing nobody's finding these pages. We recommend that we highlight them further up inside the sitemap or better buttons. And obviously the supervisor, the human, would be expected to approve for an update and rebuild because, we like to keep control. I'd say that's a big thing to mention. So I can imagine automated AI adaptation tools starting to come out to market over the next 6 to 12 months. Which is optimizing the user flow with like A/B testing. But I can't imagine that being heavily used because as humans, we don't like to let go of control. We like being the supervisors. So I'm not sure if that would really take off. And obviously, whenever anything is changed, the code generation steps go all the way through it again. So a small change may actually require an entire code rebuild. And if it's cheap, if the generative AI is able to do this quickly and in a very stable manner with validated tests against it, I can't imagine that actually being a process. Maybe it's going to be breaking it up into services, so therefore it only needs to be testing certain services that utilize it. But I think it's a very realistic approach that this is going to be something that can be implemented in. So that was a quick overview of how I believe development of new platforms is going to work in the new world. So very little technical knowledge is actually going to be required to deliver full product to the market. So hypothetically, if this existed today, I could charge £50,000 for you to use this platform, and that would be considered a very cheap and very optimal solution instead of going to agencies to build this, because you'd have a working version in the same day. So if this existed right now as a SaaS product, 50 grand, the people will throw money at me, I'm pretty confident with, if it did all these steps and produced a really good output at the end. So existing platforms, I would imagine, be able to utilize the same process as well, but just one step before, where the code would be pumped into the discovery process to actually build out the discovery parts and then rewrite the code base against what it's found inside the discovery of or the requirements of the system. So I know some people are very much naysayers, don't really agree with this. Other people are all for it and maybe go too far with it, saying, oh, this will be available this year. We don't need to hire developers anymore. Before we even try and tackle that piece, let's take a step back as like a non-developer view. How did we get here? Over the last 20 years since I've been working, development has got much more complicated and expensive. So when I originally started, the first JavaScript framework was MooTools that I was using before jQuery even existed. But, and since then you had one backend and some HTML and it was all templated. Now we have different front-end frameworks with Angular, Vue, React. You've got micro front ends, you've got microservices, serverless, strongly typed languages, non-strongly typed languages, different mobile languages. So just for mobile devices, you have to build one in Swift and one in Java or Kotlin. And then you've got blockchain as well. And now we've got AI coding that's coming through. It's gotten much more complicated than when I originally came to market. And it's got more complicated because the challenges that we had to tackle were very unique to deal with scale. Obviously, if code generation is going to be automated, these challenges sort of move away a little bit, and therefore we don't have to have such a wide array of options for this. It can be much more refined. And you also see a lot of examples in modern day industry where someone makes a wrong decision at an early stage and it's a one-way door. It causes exponential cost increases to maintain these systems, larger teams. If you decide to use microservices or serverless too early on, and you don't take off with massive growth and you're only like turning over 10 grand a month, it's not worth it to have a 10-person team to help maintain and keep a big platform running. It should have just been in a monolith to start with. So the main thing to point out here is CEOs and business owners don't care about these decisions. They don't care about the technology that's used. All they care about is, does the platform do what it needs to do? And can we run this in a cheaper way? They don't care how the sausage is made. They just obviously want the hot dog. So another key piece to highlight is, with a long run of development starting at hobbyists, which is how the computing industry really got going, and now this has become a mainstream and big tech industry where people get paid a lot of money, value is starting to be reconsidered. The revenue per employee is going to have to go up. I mean, we're sort of seeing this now with the economic troubles we're having right now. The market's not as good. There's a lot more engineers that are unemployed right now. Some of it is due to, not having budget, VC money drying up, and obviously having to adapt their model to, not having zero rate interest anymore. They have to be profitable. They can't just scale. And some of them, there's some rumors saying, companies are waiting for AI to replace engineers' jobs. It's too early to consider that is the case yet. But the cost to get to the market right now is too high in most people's opinion. And this limits their ability to build more functionality for what they want to offer. So any future changes are going to get more expensive as well with technical debt. So you build a POC. If you build against the POC, you've probably got technical debt inside the platform, and you have to constantly reiterate that out into new services. Things get very expensive, so therefore businesses are always looking for a way to optimize the money they have. Obviously, this is the case with hosting, not too long ago, until it was not. Commoditization of the cloud has made it faster, more accessible, and cheaper. And I can imagine web development going the same way, just like with Excel. Excel got brought in. Instead of people doing this manually, we now had spreadsheets, and therefore you're able to optimize the way a lot of people work. And obviously, I'm going to touch upon the fact that those employees didn't lose their jobs. They were then migrated into other roles and responsibilities. So I think it's also how development is done differently. With such technologies available, priorities start to change. So writing clean, readable code, now we don't care about. If humans no longer need to read it, this no longer needs to actually be in that format. So I think that's a key thing to start to understand when we do get further down this path. Technical debt and refactoring the code. This should be able to be done automatically, quickly, and cheaply. So therefore, technical debt's going to disappear. If, even with platforms where you've got an old code base, if the world comes true and this comes to light, you pump it in and it produces out new code. Obviously, there's already versions of this in ChatGPT trying to do the same thing. Obviously, the confidence isn't there yet. The outcomes are not bad, not perfect, but we're still in the early days in the industry. Documenting the code. Again, if there's not humans looking at the code, this is no longer needed. But what I do want to highlight here is that the decision making is an important context that does still need to be recorded. Obviously, modern day world, we write stories, we write Jira tickets, and then they disappear into the ether of a Jira history closed ticket list. These decisions are going to have to remain, because if the code is constantly getting rebuilt, that reference still needs to be reconsidered every single time. So the decision making that was done from the product or the BA side of things needs to be covered elsewhere. So I'm imagining like a AI file, JSON format, where decision making is clearly identified as more of a configuration of a request for how to rebuild this platform again and again and again. But again, documenting the code now goes out the window. Writing automated tests, as I mentioned, I think the existing solutions are already out in the market are not bad, and it's only going to get better. Development planning, again, if developers are not building the majority of this code, this is now no longer needed, and development is now minutes instead of months. So therefore, we no longer need to do deep planning sessions to do this, and this also ties into the reducing scope for timeline costs. Obviously, the hardest thing as a proof of concept is you build something that's unique to you as a business that you want to take to market to show, but it misses everything else that your competitors have. So therefore, people don't get as engrossed in because you don't have customer support. You don't have a payment subscription program right now. There is no way to have your own custom managed portal. If it's no longer relevant, if it's now pennies to add large amounts of functionality instantly, there's no need for scope reduction. Right then. Another thing I think is going to be really interesting in the future, and one of the things I'm going to try and talk a bit about this at the CTO Craft conference that's coming up in a month's time, is how project management is now also going to change. The move from waterfall to agile was very large. So obviously moving away from 12-month release cycles to 2-week sprints, that was a huge improvement for the industry for fast iterative development and getting things out the door. Obviously, the great thing about waterfall is you included all the scope. Bad thing about agile is you're only doing limited scope, so you're slowly trickling the product features into the product over time. The new world has the best of both. You're not reducing scope. You have all the scope that you request, but you also have faster releases and then even advisory changes that AI can be generating for you against maybe the platform during the build process or when it's even out to market. So I'm going to assume that agile development is going to be replaced with some sexy new name process to account for these improvements. Obviously, right now, the initial issue is with things like Copilot, developers have been able to produce more code in effectively shorter periods of time if implemented properly. The team sizes are going to be reduced. The amount of features you're going to get into a sprint are going to be increased. I would say there's going to be a bit more turbulence in the agile world because trying to plan for 20 features instead of just 4 is going to be a lot harder from the project management and BA standpoint because developers are coding at a faster rate. If obviously they're strong engineers that are able to utilize the tools well and the tools are actually helping them. And entry into the market has now become much cheaper, of course. With the opportunity to have leaner teams, team management is now reduced. Decision-making like code language or architecture is now a two-way door. So that was the big thing I highlighted earlier, where previously we're going down the microservices route. You're tied to that because once you've got a certain part down the path, rolling that back into a monolith is a lot of cost for the business with no added value apart from the maintenance fees that's going to be in future. If you can switch this into another language or another architecture very quickly, easily, and automatically with a cost for your AI tooling, then the benefits are great. You can make the wrong decision to choose PHP and then switch to .NET, or maybe you chose some really crazy new language that nobody knows anymore. You can switch that way. No scope reduction obviously helps a lot as well. It's also worth pointing out that these tools are enabling individuals and small teams to take on challenges that were previously only addressable by governments or large corporations. So just because right now, some large organization with all these features, you can never compete in that market. That's now starting to become less of a blocker because you can compete and build the same amount of functionality in a much cheaper, faster way. So we're effectively democratizing the ability to solve our biggest problems, which is great news, really positive for the industry. Of course, there are a lot of naysayers out there, lots of arguments against this, and obviously feel free to ask your questions or in the comments to put your own thoughts there. But one of the, here's some key ones here. AI can't understand what the client wants. Yep, this is hard. People struggle to understand what the client wants. But I think we're almost there with good prompts, checks, and iterations. I feel that is a challenge that can be solved with the existing technology that we're already at. Developers build logic and problem-solving skills. Yes, but so can an AI if there are clear instructions and the ability to iterate. Code and its creators are inextricably intertwined. Yes, that's true, but it can be true with a generative AI as well. And this will put people out of work. Well, I'm going to try and address this in a couple more slides. But just to highlight, if a company is able to save extra cash, this doesn't necessarily mean it's just going to be profit. This means that money can be reinvested elsewhere into the business that's also going to provide more value. So let's talk about roles. I consider PMs and BAs are going to end up becoming platform managers. If there's no need to manage developers or even plan projects, then that part of the responsibility disappears. Instead, they are going to be supervisors of decisions. This will be part of the initial platform, but they'll be part of the initial platform build, but also continuing on improvements recommended by the AI for actually improving the platform they have. So therefore, you still need someone reviewing what AI is recommending and then still accepting or rejecting the requests, and obviously doing the rebuilds and making sure everything's still running smoothly. So these roles, of course, like they are already, they're very product and customer focused, supporting the business with their needs. QA, I still haven't made my mind up on this right now. QA could still remain if AI is not able to cover the test coverage at a deep enough level themselves. As humans like to validate solutions built by AI, which is absolutely right. So QA could still play a heavy role in this and even become a platform manager like on the previous slide. So I would say the QA, they're very product focused, user focused, and they could become the platform managers if the QA piece does disappear. Prompt experts. Now, this is an interesting one. So as of right now, this skill has lots of value as systems are calling models directly. Therefore, they're required to get the correct information in the right format back and also reduce costs with token reduction. So there's a lot of value to prompt experts right now. But as the industry moves away from calling models directly into agents or like some other middle layer, these systems should be able to ask questions to improve the requests themselves. So, and the cost savings, I assume, to become less important as generative AI becomes cheaper. So I consider prompt experts only a temporary role that the industry needs at this stage, and that is soon going to be replaced out. And designers, as I mentioned, walking through the new way of building platforms, there is always value for custom design, even for custom chairs, custom beds, anything. There's always the custom aspect of design that's still going to always exist. Though I think templates and drag and drop tooling is going to be more commonly used. The biggest issue right now with a lot of the tooling that exists, the no-code solutions, is you get locked into their platform. So that sort of disappears away if AI is able to build you the platform on top of the design. These tools normally still need manual tweaking for some designers. So I can imagine designers are going to be utilizing these tools more. And so you got the two levels. You got implementing, utilizing no coding tools to build designs, customize it to make it look pretty, because even when I use them, I still struggle to make them look nice. And then obviously the heavy, very custom design, which can be exported out with Figma and other tools in the market. I'd also assume AI to be providing recommendations like copilots. I think I'm not heavy enough in the design side, but there's some platforms that probably already offer such things. But like copilots used in development right now, I'd assume more AI tools to copilot designers to help them with their decision making as they are designing out. And developers, here we go. I believe there's still going to be a market for software developers in the foreseeable future, though the nature of the work will change and the tools that we use might be very different to what we have now. Web development, though, as done today, will be massively reduced due to generative AI systems. So the way that we work right now, building platforms, building websites, I think a lot of that is going to slowly diminish. So, it's like to happen already with Copilot, with engineers being able to produce more in shorter space of time. And obviously that means that there's going to be much more supply of engineers in the market. But still, demand's going to remain high for developers as more industries now incorporate more technology into their business and processes. So I think it's, as I showed on the earlier slides, that more industries are going to be incorporating technology. These skill sets of computer science and data management is all going to be needed. So therefore, it's going to become a smaller market as what we've got right now, but a broader area. And it's always good to highlight that coding is not about a particular language or even about writing programs per se. It's about cultivating a mindset of computational thinking, enhancing your ability to break down complex problems into manageable components, devising logical solutions, and thinking critically. That is a quote, and I can't remember where I got it from, so apologies to wherever that quote came from, but I think that's a really good quote. So movement towards computer science with data migration focus rather than just coding is going to be important. These skills are going to become increasingly important to solving business problems, which is what we're here for in the first place. We've just got tied into the coding side to solve the business problems. Now, if we're moving away from that, we're still solving business problems, utilizing these tools to help us get there. So for the developers out there, we're an adaptable bunch, as we've had to be to stay up to date with the technologies over our careers. As you can see, the amount of technologies that exist, the amount of different ways of doing things, we've had to adapt. So I see no reason to believe that this adaptability is not going to help us as our roles do actually change. AI and ML experts, these skills are likely to be required for a long period. This new world is likely to hook into everything that with these systems for different use cases. So I can imagine that being a very stable, strong, long career at this stage. Some skills could be, I can imagine this breaking out into 2 layers. Some skills will be basic, understanding which systems that exist, how to use them, and other skills will be the deep work, actually improving and building these systems in future. Middle managers, and let's say probably CTOs as well. What does this mean for us? I'd expect there to be fewer middle managers as team sizes are now able to be reduced. This is going to result in more responsibilities for the rest of the team members that sit under the middle managers that exist right now. So technical leads are likely to increase to cover the ownership of the middle management layer that's going to be, removed or at least reduced. This is going to result in more opportunity to build more cohesive teams due to lower attrition, as there are smaller teams with more responsibility. Obviously, direction, business leadership, technical leadership is still going to exist. So, we're not going to disappear. But I think that because of the breadth, which I'm going to touch on in the moment, it's going to be more distributed. Industry impacts. As I mentioned earlier, the reduction of human readable programming languages. If humans are not reading code, why keep it readable? If code could be optimized for performance instead of readability, why not do that? But there must obviously be strong confidence in all the other areas for this to actually become real. Do tests cover all scenarios? Are issues flagged for manual checks? And then heavily regulated areas like banking and healthcare would likely follow afterwards. Though, interestingly, I'm wrong with that. I've been talking to a few different high-level people in different banking sectors, and banking is actually much further ahead down this route than most with their AI implementation, not just with the standard, fraud checks and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to see one sector that I would have felt that the regulation would really be holding them up is actually, pushing ahead really quickly in this area. An overfilled market. This is where I think a lot more opportunity for engineers is going to come in. With the barrier to entry is going to be getting greatly reduced. Like I say, if it only costs you £50,000 to build an entire platform, there's going to be abundance of solutions that are all very similar to each other because a lot more people could be a lot more affordable. That price point is just a finger in the air. Let's say it gets down to 20,000, 10,000. Most people should be able to raise that through friends and family and have a fully working platform. So the focus is now going to move to providing solutions for one market segment. So very specified of, okay, I'm a fintech that focuses on this type of user in this type of situation, or I'm focusing on these B2B customers that are only inside the health tech market that need, a ticket management system, very greatly reduced. So I think, in short, the market size is going to increase, but with smaller development needs inside each company. I think that's going to be a big change in the system as big companies that have a large amount of engineers, they're going to decrease the amount of engineers they're going to require, but those engineers are going to be able to still find new roles in an ever-growing marketplace with more businesses that are going to require those skills and capabilities. And when it comes to third parties, they'll need to adapt to these tools need to adapt to work with AI generated code easily, making it easy to set up accounts. So some third parties will disappear as AI will be able to actually build that functionality for you. Let's think of an example like Mailin, SendGrid, Mailgun, or let's say payment providers. That stuff, I still imagine you don't want to build that yourself because there's a lot of hassle about regulation, and also like, let's say emails, just having IP addresses that are able to be accepted for sending emails. Those third parties are safe because they've got their own protections. But other third parties that do a tool that AI can build for you into your platform directly, they're at big risk. Then you've got like the low code, no code tools out there that, they're either going to disappear or adapt. They're not going to be able to keep their data locked in like they do right now. So therefore, there's going to be a big impact for them as we move forward. So 2030, this might be the wrong timeline, but I believe it's a not if, but when moment. AI is progressing very quickly, and I can't believe this isn't one of the steps that's going on our journey. So if I stop sharing my screen, there we go. And hopefully you can see me full now. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. I have talked along for 40 minutes, so hopefully that's been fun. Feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A section on the side. I have some pre-made questions already created, but hopefully you've enjoyed that, and it's provided a different perspective of what you've been seeing so far. So the sort of questions I get where I've shown this to other people, do you think this is all possible in 6 years? I think I might be a little bit too restrictive. I think this could happen in less than 6 years. So if we're looking at 2030, I'll be surprised if a lot of these tools are not being generated much earlier. We've already seen this with Devin. We've already seen this with GPT Pilot. Companies already starting to build these types of tools already. So therefore, I expect that they're going to get better, and there's going to be a eureka moment where suddenly it's like, yes, this platform can do this. And I think a big piece here is I think this is going to end up being a SaaS solution rather than something you run locally on your machine. The reason why I think it's going to be a SaaS solution is because the profit to be made off this is going to be amazing. If I'm a non-technical person, I don't want to be downloading code bases, LLMs, and being able to run models to be able to do this. I'm going to want to just pay, get questioned about what I want, get it built, deployed, test it, and go, yes, I'm happy. I'm not going to want to do anything else really. I'm going to want to keep it as a non-technical person. So I think that's going to be a big benefit for what we're trying to do here. So therefore, I think even though we've got great progress with LLMs being able to get to run locally on your machine, it's still very technically heavy, this type of stuff. So I think SaaS solutions will be there, and they'll also have another revenue model by getting commission from third parties. So we're going to end up hooking in, APIs into Stripe. So therefore, I'm going to get a commission by being the platform that's signed you up as a new account. And the same thing with any other parties that exist there. Okay, other questions that could be going. Is coding going to be a lost art? I think that probably not, because I think there's a skill of coding anyway. I would recommend universities still keeping that. I still think it's important to learn how to code because it's the way that you think. It's the way that you go through the way that you solve problems is very important. But I think obviously we're not going to have anywhere near the same number of developers that you do obviously right now in the market, because we have an awful lot still coming through now. So I think it's definitely a skill that's worthwhile. And as this gets better and better, just like us as CTOs, VP of engineering, we use it less. I reckon that, coding is going to be more of a hobbyist and a way of thinking process rather than something that you do as heavily on a daily basis for coding, except for fun. We used to run in the olden days to get somewhere. Now we do it for sports and activity. I can imagine coding become like running, where we do it for fun and our own training. Is a great question here. So will Google reform and evolve away from its whiteboard interview? And yes, the grapes are sour for me on that one. So yeah, I mean, look, that's a good question. I think the requirements for what you need engineers to be able to do is going to change. Companies like Google that are heavily involved inside the AI space, these coding aspects going to be needed. So I can imagine that's still existing. And I still think the solution in for developers, for architects and developers, is mostly solved. We don't come across as many challenges that haven't already been solved by another organization. Like the way Twitter had to deal with its fail well and scale in such a way, that's documented. The way Netflix implemented their architecture, that's documented. So these are all solutions that can be handled. And the way that cloud computing exists right now, with a basic monolith and database with secondary servers as read only, there's massive amounts of scale for users without needing to get to more complex architecture. So I think that this is all going to be, I think it's going to be less required. Obviously, people are still going to know this. We don't want this knowledge to completely disappear and rely completely on AI. But the need for it in your daily job is going to sort of disappear because it's not what you're going to be doing on a daily basis anymore. The AI is going to be able to build the application and deploy it in a way that's going to be scalable for you automatically. Obviously, at a point, not yet. Yeah, so is automated code development already possible? Yes, as I mentioned, Devin, GPT Pilot, and even just typing into ChatGPT yourself, there's already a way of doing this. But obviously, it's not great. It's very early days. It's nice to play with, but this isn't a ready-made solution which we can say, right, we don't need engineers anymore. We're just going to use this. So of course, that goes out the window. One of the questions, this process fully automated has many parts. In what order do you think those parts become available? That's a very good question. So I've been thinking about this. I'm always playing around with my own little projects, thinking, well, I could probably make a lot of money if I just pick one aspect of this, get a really good result to that, and sell that to some business, OpenAI or whoever wants to do that. Everything needs to be working together for this to be a solution where we go, right, we don't need engineers in the same level that we do right now. The order of it right now, you've got people jumping right to the end game with Devin, GPT Pilot. People are saying, right, we're going to build an all-encompassing system that says, right, what do you want to build? We ask some questions. Here's some code to do it. It's great to see that process, but we're not there yet. And as you can see, my view of what the process needs to look like and the fact that you need so many layers of iteration, the cost is still quite high to do that amount of iterations. If as you're dealing with token costs, every time you're rebuilding the code base, that's a lot of tokens you're pumping in and a lot of tokens you're pumping back out. It's probably still too expensive. Well, when I say if you're paying 50 grand for a website, that's probably within the token budget. But yeah, as we're going through this, I can imagine multiple different stages are going to be built, and I imagine some of it to be built independently and then sort of purchased. So I can imagine someone's going to come out with a great build test platform. Someone's going to come out with a great discovery process. And the discovery one, I think, is coming first. I think that's the most important thing, getting what they want in a clearly defined way for a human to understand, but then also for an AI to understand. Hopefully that answers your question. Looking especially at the Devin one, feels like overpromised and under-delivered. What are your pointers or hints to see real value in tools? E.g., Copilot is useful, Duet needs some time. Is there any source other than try it out and hope for the best? Where we are in the market right now, that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying it out and doing it for the best. Devin was, well marketed, got an awful lot of public coverage. And as the first developer tool, like I said, they're not the first. There's at least 2 or 3 different open source projects out there where you can download the code yourself and do this. So Devin definitely wasn't the first, but they're the best, well marketed ones. And yeah, right now, we're not there yet. There's multiple things that need to change to get us to that stage. Our models probably need to be bigger. They need to be faster. They need to be cheaper. And then all the architecture needs to sit around it. Also needs to exist there. Thanks for highlighting here all those questions in the QA tab. There weren't any before. So right now I'd say the answer is try it out for the best. First question from the QA tab. Good day. What about QA automation engineer? Will they have their place in future development process? Yeah, good question. Look, QA automation engineers are good QAs to start with, because they need to understand what process needs to be built, but they also obviously also have the technical capability to code this in. I would imagine if the QA piece is able to be solved with generative AI, which I feel should be possible, then the need for them to code is going to be removed. But the value is still going to be there because they still understand the QA process and they understand the product flow and expectations of the business. So I still feel that they may be moving into more platform manager roles in, much more years in the future. So I would expect the role to change quite a lot. If obviously AI can't solve that, but all the other parts are working, then the QA automation engineers can be heavily utilized, but they'll probably have more AI tooling to help them. So they'll need to be involved in the AI tooling. Things like LangServe to support LangChain testing that can write an awful amount of automated test cases for you. That's great, but you still need to deal with potentially other edge cases that are not being tackled right with the generative AI that exists. Next question. AI is progressing quickly, but wouldn't it take more than continuous incremental improvements to LLMs before we can get to the point where it can design software? Put another way, can you design software that solves real world problems without deep involvement from someone who understands the real world? Look, it's a great question. Maybe I'm being naive, but I believe that this can be solved. I think there's going to be incremental improvements to LLMs all the time. And as I say, the LLM is only a small part. The agent and middle layers that need to sit in between, that's the intelligence that needs to understand the context of what it's trying to achieve to be able to utilize the LLMs to generate whatever it needs to generate and then iterate against that. So I feel that software can solve real world problems as long as the requirements are well defined. And this is where I think a lot of people get confused about understanding what they want and what actually needs to be built. So just because, the agent isn't there just to sit in, just to manage the client, the idea I'd say is that the AI also has understanding of other context outside of just the client's requests. So if we are building something in the fintech space, maybe it understands a lot more about the fintech sector, about how things work, and it's able to utilize that understanding and give recommendations to the human supervisor to then align that up to what it's actually trying to produce. But it's a great question, very deep, and I'm sure if I see you at CTO Craft Comic, we'll dive into that further here. A couple more questions left before we roll up. I think developers will be involved in fine-tuning platforms. That's interesting because fine-tuning is an interesting place where I'm not completely sold 100% on this yet. So right now, you do see a lot of people say, all right, what I want doesn't exist right now. I want to fine-tune the model. So they start fine-tuning the model, but then everything else that was working goes to hell because the weights have now changed because it's now fine-tuned. I think fine-tuning is a heavy, risky area. It's better to, I don't think that's the solution to the problem that we have. It's a solution we have right now, but I don't think it's a solution to the problem in the future. So that's why I don't consider fine-tuning the direction that we're going in further in the future. I think that the LLMs, the models, the agents that we're going to have are going to solve these problems without the need for fine-tuning. Obviously, certain cases where you want to be really specific, maybe fine-tuning is going to be the solution, but I feel like it's a temporary solve right now due to limitations of the technology rather than anything else. Hopefully that's answered your question. If all of the predictions you have are becoming true in the future, what do you think we should be focusing on invest now as CTOs? Thanks, John. That's a great question. I've got something resourcing. Yeah, cool. It's interesting. I think that understanding the technology and our roles is going to change. If we're no longer managing engineers, if we're no longer supporting with roadmap planning, our capabilities as CTOs are now going to be focused more on the business value part. Yes, we've got technical knowledge. Yes, maybe we'll be able to go further down the AI path than a standard engineer or platform manager like I highlighted here. So I think our role is going to change. I think we've got a good few years yet before this starts to really impact us. What impacts us most at the moment is how we're managing our teams. So with the reason for highlighting this and doing this talk today is to say, as we move down this path, as development does become faster and we're able to do more with the AI tools that we have, just scaling up our engineering teams might no longer be the solution that we need to go down. It's what we default to at the moment. We need to deliver more features, we need to deliver more products, we need to refactor this code base. AI tooling helps us deal with that stuff without needing to scale up our teams. So therefore, we need to be very cautious about our hiring plans over the next few years. Like I say, we're a couple of years away, I think, from this starting to heavily impact us, but we're starting to see the co-pilot aspects already starting to have a piece of that. So therefore, the revenue per engineer is going up. So therefore, we're expected to get more done with the existing people that we have right now. In the future, much harder to answer that one. And yeah, for CTO Craft Con, we can talk about it. I'm really not sure. Look, we're all in the same boat right now. We can't plan that far ahead because the industry is moving so fast. We don't know what it's going to look like. But obviously, we need to keep an eye on it and be able to adapt when the industry does change in such a way. Right, I've got 4 minutes left, so let's just see the next question. What are your thoughts on how data protection may change and any other changes in the data engineering role? Data protection, this is always a gray area inside the LLM space at the moment. Can you use OpenAI's APIs? They say they don't train their models against that data. Great, you can use it. Well, I've got a lot of concerns about that because they don't clarify how they deal with the caching layer of their solution, because you're not working directly with a model, you're working with a system. So therefore, data protection for how we utilize these systems is still a bit up in the air. Things like Amazon AWS's Bedrock, they have different models in there and they're HIPAA compliant. So therefore, no data that you're putting in should be getting stored or utilized or cached. Or maybe there's a caching issue there as well, I don't know. But none of that should be an issue. So I feel that it's an issue that needs to be tackled. It needs to be clear for any of the solutions that you're using. And if you are running your live system against an AI system, and this is a centralized SaaS product, then the data protection needs to be obviously very, very strong. With the data engineering roles themselves, which are obviously going to be going much more towards the lower end of this, understanding the data, the code, what's getting pumped in, what's getting pumped out, they're obviously going to need to be aware and obviously considering this. One of the biggest things that is difficult to do at the moment is to be tagging data effectively for LLMs, to say that this data can be utilized in this use case, but not in this use case. That's something which I think we're slowly moving towards, especially with things like RAG solutions. I've been having fun trying to solve that problem, where it's like, okay, this user role can have responses with this type of data, but this user role cannot. It's hard to do it further down the path, with vector databases, though technically it is possible, but I'm still playing around with that. So hopefully that answers your question. One last question just before I wrap it up. Do developments in AI mean that the new code will be created without bugs beyond just business logic bugs? Well, I would say in the end game is yes. So if, the whole purpose of multiple iterations is that it removes the bugs. Obviously, you've got the question of bug versus feature. That's a feature that's supposed to do that, which we get in today's world as well. But the idea is that the test cases are broad enough and wide enough to be able to flag that there is a bug and the code needs to be reiterated on again to better solve that problem. Again, right now, you try and do this, you can't guarantee there's no bugs in the system. So yeah, I would say there's no reason why that can't be solved with generative AI in my mind. I don't see a technical blocker. It's just more of a case of our technology is not there yet, but we're moving in that direction. Okay, a few more questions that exist, but I do apologize for not getting to them. I hope you've all enjoyed this. I hope that you found this interesting and fun. These are recorded, so we should be able to get a copy out for anyone that's missed the start. For everybody here, please do check out the CTO Craft website. The conference is up in about 4 weeks' time in the QE2 in London. So if you haven't got your ticket, go there to grab that now. And yeah, that's all. So thank you all for joining me. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.